The Good Friday Agreement was a defining moment in recent Irish history.
Sharing time? Are you sharing time?
I am, but I'm not quite aware of who I'm sharing time with, but I'm sure.
There are a couple of very eager beavers behind you there.
But they know. So, Gordon Margaret, Irish. So, Corachiac Stara will be on a compromise between conflicting political positions following decades of conflict, the roots of which are to be found in the British government's involvement in our country. For the first time since partition, the agreement brought peace and stability and hope and the opportunity for a better future for the people of Ireland. It most directly affected the North, but has also positively impacted on this part of the island and on the diaspora. It ushered in 15 years of relative peace. Shasian Process Shahana Naharan, Mar Hampla da Oichana Ella and a Will Tridge. Senator George Mitchell, who did a remarkable job of charting a difficult course through the negotiations, correctly anticipated that agreeing the deal was the easy bit. The hard bit, he said, was getting to implement it, and he was right. The twists and turns from April 10th, 1998 to May 2013 have been many. At times the process has collapsed. At other times it looked as if the securocrats and the naysayers and the begrudgers were going to succeed and the whole process was going to unravel. But with patience and perseverance, difficult issues, including those of weapons and of policing, were overcome. Along the way, the UUP was replaced by the DUP as the largest unionist party, and few imagined Sinn Féin and the DUP ever reaching agreement on the institutions. That's what happened, and Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness demonstrated enormous courage and vision to make power sharing work. 2 years ago, an inclusive, democratically elected local government with all island interlocking implementation bodies and the Council of Ministers successfully completed a full term of office. Of course, this doesn't mean that everything is working smoothly. Making peace is a process, not an event. But unlike previous efforts, which were largely imposed by the British, with the support of successive Irish governments, and which excluded sections of political opinion, the negotiations that created the Good Friday Agreement were genuinely inclusive. The agreement also addressed the broad range of issues that had been previously ignored. It deals with constitutional issues, political matters and institutional matters. It put in place a mechanism to hold a border poll, to address the issue of partition and to achieve Irish unity democratically and peacefully. It also set up political structures that provide for the sharing of power, while including checks and balances to prevent the reoccurrence of past political abuses. The underlying ethos of the agreement is equality. Agus Corabarta a fine John co-ononis of Wintamach. And this is reflected in the fact that the word equality is mentioned 21 times in the Good Friday Agreement. It's not mentioned at all in previous agreements, for example, in the Sunningdale Agreement. And since then, since Good Friday, there have been further negotiations, most notably at Weston Park and St Andrews and at Hillsborough Castle. Regrettably, once the political institutions were stabilised and the hard issues of policing and weapons dealt with, the government here took its eye off the issue. They took their eye off the prize. And the British Tory Lib Dem government has also not honoured commitments as it should have. Consequently, there have been a number of outstanding issues, including a Bill of Rights for the North, an All-Ireland Charter of Rights, the establishment of the North-South Consultative Forum, and the introduction of an Act na Gaeilge. The British government has also failed to act on its Weston Park commitment to hold an independent inquiry into the killing of human rights lawyer Pat Finucane. At the same time, the securocrats continue to abuse human rights, most clearly in the continued detention of Marion Price and Martin Corey. Both governments have also failed to address the need for a victim-centred truth and reconciliation process. But the greatest threat to the agreement at this time comes from the British government. The decisions taken by Mr Cameron and his colleagues are seriously undermining the Good Friday Agreement and the political institutions. At the centre of this is a failure to support a society moving out of decades of conflict. Citizens and communities need hope and prosperity, This demands economic investment. Citizens whose lives have been blighted by war, by generational sectarianism and division, need to see that peace can change their lives and those of their children. That's why all the parties agreed to a significant peace dividend, an investment of 18 billion at St Andrews. However, one of the first actions of the current British government was to renege on this commitment. And that decision removed from the executive the ability to deliver a major capital investment programme which would have had the dual effect of providing much-needed employment in the construction industry while bringing our roads, hospitals and schools up to the necessary standard. The next action of the British government was to cut the block grant by 4 billion. Within the fiscal constraints of the executive, the parties managed to raise some additional revenue and tried to offset the worst effects of the cut to the block grant. But this approach was clearly stretching their finances to the limit. The British government also refused to devolve powers on corporation tax. And now the Tory Lib Dem government, in pursuit of austerity, is seeking to impose a £1 billion cut of welfare benefits that will take millions out of the local economy and hurt disadvantaged and vulnerable families. This is unacceptable, and Martin McGuinness recently told the British Prime Minister this very directly. He also briefed the Teachta on these matters. Last week, Martin Peter Robinson met the British Secretary of State to discuss an economic package for the executive. This was another bad meeting. Ní féidir le seo leanúint ará. And that's why I make the point that it's the British government which is seriously undermining the work of the executive and of the political institutions. Despite all of this, the executive has achieved much, including £8 billion of investment and the creation of thousands of jobs through inward investment. And today, Allstate announced that it will create 650 jobs in the north, and that's good work by the executive and by Allstate. But the executive's ability to demonstrate that peace can deliver real economic change has been seriously damaged, particularly by these cuts in welfare benefits. And it must be challenged on this. Now, we're challenging them, but the Irish government is a co-equal guarantor with the British government of the Good Friday Agreement and subsequent agreements. So the government here needs to urgently intervene and to challenge this foolish and short-sighted approach by the British government. The government here needs a strategy to keep London to its obligations under the Good Friday Agreement and to remove the threat to the executive and the institutions created by its cuts agenda. Sin é cathaoirleach,